All right, hello. This is Jason again, coming back with a digital analytics uh, video podcast kind of thing. And we are talking about data collection today. Specifically, um, I want to talk about where this fits into the overall digital analytics ecosystem, right? Because there are 5 different phases. At least we talk about 5 different phases for digital analytics. And each one of these phases has to occur. Um, they're always done. Every digital analytics implementation, regardless of how it is, they're always done. Okay, the 5 phases start with data collection. We're going to talk about that today. Then there's summarization, then enrichment, and publishing, and finally reporting. And we'll get a little bit more into those as we go, but data collection is the first one, and you always have each one of these five. So you always have data collection, even if you're not intentionally or manually doing this as a separate step. If you're using a tool like Adobe Analytics or Google Analytics, the data collection part always happens, and it's a part of how you implement your code in your app or implement on your site. That is what drives the implementation part. So you may not be intentionally saying, hey, here's where we're going to place tracking. Many sites just have it built in. If you're using Shopify, for example, or Squarespace, or another site hosting tool or content tool, that might be built in, but it's always happening, right? And data collection is important. All the 5 phases have an important piece. You can't really do digital analytics without these 5 different steps. But data collection is the first, and I think the most important overall. It is what it sounds like, right? We're collecting information about what our users, what our customers are doing on the site. They're engaging in content. They're filling out forms. Maybe they're building a basket. If they're converting, how they're interacting throughout the apps that we have, maybe on mobile devices, throughout the websites that we have on the web. Data collection is all about capturing that, right? We have to do it on an event by event basis. Generally, we're talking about what users see, right? If they viewed a page, they viewed some kind of content, or if they interacted with something. So they clicked on a button, maybe they filled out a form, so that's clicking submit the form. They completed the conversion, right? So usually what users are seeing or doing, that's what we're trying to capture. And it's at an event level. So every time somebody, a guest, sees something or does something, call goes out or a message is sent back to that tool. And this is pretty consistent across all different tools. They all basically work the same way. They're going to capture these kinds of information when a user does something. So you have this idea of data collection through any type of project. And why is it important, right? It's about the quality of the data you're collecting. It's if you collect poor quality data, intentionally or not, it impacts the results. So if you're building a model, predictive model, let's say, if you collect poor quality data, then you will get poor quality results out of that model. If you are looking at generating insights for how your website or your application is performing, and you collect poor quality data, you will get poor quality results and therefore poor quality insights. You will make assumptions and try and detect trends and make decisions about how your business should be running, and they'll be wrong because you're collecting you don't have good data quality when at data collection. This comes from a few different places, right? And one is about it's a tough challenge. There's lots of technical pieces involved in data collection because you're getting into the browser mechanics or the application mechanics or the platform mechanics, right? Specifically what these things are doing. On the web, you have different cookie behaviors. Different types of browsers behave differently, will accept different kinds of cookies, and depending on the tool you're using or how you're implementing tracking, you may be getting a lot more of user activity from certain browser combinations, let's say. You can also, if they're app-based, there can be different inconsistencies. Maybe it's about how it's being implemented in the apps, right? So you have iOS developers, for example. There may be different ways that they are implementing, and you're having certain users, and you're not tracking all of their data, for example. It gets intricate, and we're going to talk more about maintenance and monitoring in a bit, but it's important to understand that the quality of what you're collecting and the quality of your implementation like directly correlates to what you're able to get out of it. And everything else after you collect the data is 100% dependent on the quality of your implementation, the quality of what you're doing, being able to accurately reflect user interactions, user events in a way that you're getting all of that information and able to drive reporting and drive your business insights off of it. I think, especially with tools, it makes it easy to kind of gloss over that and say, oh, I've implemented Google Analytics and I put their script in, so we're getting all the right data. Well, that may or may not be true. No tool is exempt, and no tool is going to save you from this. Adobe is a great tool also. Again, it really depends on how that tool is implemented and what you're really doing with it as to what kind of data you're going to get. So it's a combination of that tool and what your applications are like. And the tools that you can do data collection manually. You can have your application or your website send off messages to a server and collect those, and that's not necessarily better. You still have the same problems, and you still need to have that same focus on what kind of data you're collecting, and is it being collected the right way at the right time for you to have an accurate view of what customers and users are doing on your site or in your applications. So I recommend decoupling data or decoupling the data collection from the application itself. So sometimes you can have an approach where you want to have let's say you're going to capture what the application is doing, and instead of getting those the values from the application or the server, we're going to collect it from the screen or from the presentation layer, right? This is kind of common because you do want to capture what the users are seeing. That's important, but it's not a good practice to tightly couple, right, what you're capturing in the data collection to actually what users are seeing, because what they're seeing part can change a lot. So we want to extract that and have the two be separate. So you want to have your data collection run off of what's being sent and not from what's being presented on the screen. That can be kind of difficult to separate, but you don't want to be capturing values from your HTML, for example. You want to be capturing what the application knows, and those are different things. But what's the state of the application is a better way to think about how to have quality data collection and better monitoring of what users are doing and what they're interacting with. So let's talk about accuracy versus perfection. It's important you don't need to track everything. First of all, I think that a lot of times we work on implementation and lots of questions. We want to track everything. And yes, while you want to have all the answers for, tomorrow's questions, you don't need to track everything. So important to get what guests see and do, those events. But you don't need to capture every detail. It'll be too heavy. It'll be too much work to try and maintain the data quality. There's always maintenance for data collection, and if you have too many details that you're trying to capture and maintain data quality on, it'll be very hard. It's not to say that over time you can't grow to that. What I usually ask clients is, are you using that data to optimize the business? Right? Because if you're not using it directly to say, here's the business decisions I'm going to make based off of what we're collecting, then it might not be worth the cost of collecting it, because every data point that we collect has a cost associated with it. And if we add a lot of those up and we have a high cost to our implementation, high cost of maintenance, we may not see the value from it, right? From what business decisions we're able to make based off of it. So it's important to go through and identify, here are the really important KPIs, here are the things that are important to our business, and track those and capture them well and focus on data quality for those pieces than it is to have 50 different dimensions and every possible piece of data that is a part of that user session and capture all of that. It's just not as important, right? So better to focus on having a smaller number of variables that are really meaningful and that you believe in, that having that trust, that confidence in what you're capturing, and therefore the data that's coming from it is very important. I've seen a lot of scenarios where you build out reports, build out dashboard, but there are questions about that. Send those out and people go, I saw the data was, our conversions were up yesterday, but I don't trust it because some other report I saw didn't make much sense or the data was broken. As soon as people start to have distrust with data, it starts to move away from being data driven and kind of moving back down the maturity curve, right? People start making gut decisions and letting their emotions start to run their business decisions because maybe they didn't trust that result anymore. And so it's better to have a smaller number of data points that you're capturing that you're able to take action on than it is to know everything, right? So something to think about as you're planning out what your data collection approaches are. Do you use a tool or build yourself? Like I said before, the tool doesn't really matter. They're really good tools. These are well supported. Amplitude is really good. There are a lot of them now. So, go through a discovery process and look at the different tools, what works for you, maybe what doesn't. And but when you commit to that tool, really make sure that it's implemented well. So having the right pieces in place so that you're following those best practices for that tool, that you're really leveraging what the company can give you, and many that you have to pay for. I've seen companies go and they implement it, they pay a bunch of money, and then they get the tool in house and they're, okay, let's start. And then there's no maintenance, there's no follow through on really following some best practices for how you would implement and use that tool as a part of your business operations on a day-to-day basis. And so the data quality is not there. And people, then they're not using it, or there's that distrust again, and they blame the tool. Well, the problem is not the tool. The tool is just fine. The issue becomes in implementing it well and maintaining that implementation so that you continually have the good data. Different tools are good at different things. Adobe is very strong at retail. Google's really good at search and attribution reporting. Amplitude's really good at segmentation. Different tools they excel at different things, and there's nothing wrong with having multiple tools. The one rule is you don't compare tools to each other. They're measuring different things in different ways. So you will never be happy if you compare one tool to another. You can also build yourself, and I'm a big fan of doing this because you separate the concerns. If you look at what these big tool stacks do, they're often good at creating their ecosystem, and so they kind of reinforce through each section, like the 5 phases I talked about earlier, reinforcing what they do well through those different sections. The issue is that they're not good at everything. You look at Google Analytics, for example, like it does the reporting phase. It's not a great reporting tool. Adobe is the same. It does some things well. It's not as a BI tool. Like if you were just to feed your website data, that event data, into a database and report on it with a BI tool, you might be a lot happier. And that a lot of that comes down to what you as a business really want. What are your objectives? How are we going to use this business in your day-to-day operations? Think about it that way. Maybe the ease of use and having an ecosystem with a support team that can come back to you and help across the board that way will be more helpful. But by decoupling the different phases, you can get a better tool and better support for each one of those. A Tableau is a lot more capable than Adobe or Google Analytics is for their reporting, but you got a lot more to learn. You can do summarization on your own, or a tool can do it for you. You can do enrichment through database and data engineering processes, or the tool can do it for you. What do you really want and what's going to work best for you? Tools don't always have to be the answer, but they can be a very good solution depending on what your requirements are. So important to really think about that. You can also have, you can feed data from your site and collect it yourself, and then you can push that into Google Analytics, for example. So you can do different things with different combinations depending on what your requirements are, what your needs are, especially as you grow over time. And this is a really good option if you're one of those companies that needs and has a compliance concern. So you're in healthcare, you're in pharmacy, you're in finance, for example, and you need to be very careful about GDPR or HIPAA or any other high compliance kind of concerns. Then some of these scenarios where you're building and owning part of that pipeline yourself becomes much more attractive. It's probably worth it at that point to build your data collection and summarization phases and kind of drop it off at that point, and you're going to push it then and just do the reporting through a tool. That starts to make a lot of sense. We'll have more information on compliance as we go through some more of these videos, but just something to think about and the kind of build versus buy landscape. I think when it comes to data collection, two of the most important things are about validation and monitoring and maintenance, right? You want to have maintenance all the time, constantly looking at, and so these are both very intertwined, maintenance and monitoring. There's new browsers that come online, new versions, new cookie practices. There are new, your sites will change, your applications will change. That all influences how your data is being collected. And if you're not actively monitoring that, and I'm not talking about here's how many visitors and did the number of visitors we have change, but looking at that as a part of your normal business reporting. Did we have more visitors come through a certain browser type? Did we have any drop-offs? And looking at that on a more robust basis, much of that kind of monitoring reporting you can build in a reporting layer if you like, using alerting. We built a tool called Metrics Geeks. Does the same, like kind of similar monitoring capability, but you want to have an eye on what the quality of your data collection is. Again, you can't make good decisions off of bad data. It does not work that way. And with the concept of maintenance, I think this is an important piece too. Regardless of how you built your infrastructure, you need to have that eye on continually making improvements and updates to it. Yeah, if you have Adobe, they will handle lots of the improvements and lots of those updates as a part of your contract. Google Analytics makes updates all the time. Google Tag Manager, same thing. But at the interface point where your code is loaded into the site and you're capturing events off of certain elements, you have to make sure that that's always stays up to date. If maybe you have Tag Manager rules and you introduce new elements that don't fit those rules, right? You might miss something, and it might be a very small percentage. So even if you're doing alerting, it may not be a big drop. It may just be slight change, but this is where like having those routines in place, and this is part of what should be part of a data governance kind of structure, which we'll get into a little bit more, but on a later video. But having data governance is a robust part of how you're collecting and managing data, not just in data collection, but across your digital analytics workflow becomes really important. So those are the big pieces I want to talk about today when it comes to data collection. We talked about the 5 phases of digital analytics, data collection, summarization, enrichment, publishing, and reporting. We talked about why it's so important to maintain data quality, and that's really the cornerstone. It's really the foundation of every business decision you want to make. Having good data quality throughout your data collection. We talked about concepts like decoupling data collection, and whether you use a tool versus building it yourself, and how to stay on top of the game and maintain and monitor your implementation. All important concepts. Any questions, please let me know. Have a great one. Thanks a lot.